how many weeks we've been doing this, Michelle, and I did not have time to see. But I know that we got to be every bit of about at least 10 or more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we
At least.
started in April, right?
Yeah, I think so in April. And we only took like 1 week off.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's more than 10.
Yeah.
Way more than 10. Like you you could have never told me this when we had our conversations in 2019
Me
that we
either.
would that we would have been doing a virtual Bible study. But like
Yeah. And it's funny, I've been trying to use some of the time that I have now to go through just like old papers. And I was shredding the other day and I looked through one of my old journals and it talked about um, you calling me and being like, hey, we need to kick off Faith First again. And I wrote it down and I was like, I know that the Lord is calling me to do this, so I just need to go ahead and do it. But it's just
right.
so funny, like thinking about it then and then now coming into, like you said, week whatever 10 plus of this. It's just interesting how God works. That's all
For
I'm gonna
sure.
say.
For
It's
sure.
like he knows what you need before you need it. And
Yeah,
so I'm grateful to your obedience, just for kind of nudging me because I was comfortable, girl. I was comfortable not doing anything, not saying anything, not teaching anything. And yeah, so here we are.
yeah, for sure. And doing that, I honestly had no intentions really of doing like this. I was like, yeah, Michelle's gonna do it. I'm just gonna kind of like, eat off whatever she's saying. And but this like Faith First virtual Bible study has been like a blessing for me.
Yeah.
Like it's definitely kept me accountable. And kept me
Yeah. Yeah.
done that. But here we are again on week. We have no idea. We've been doing this since
Yeah.
April, but we are grateful that so many of you keep coming back to chat with us and learn with us and grow with us. So thank you guys so much just for just taking the time to spend time with us. It means a lot. So Michelle, if you would just kind of give us a flashback from last week and kind of get us prepped for what we're going to do for the month of September.
Yes. So last month for the month of August, we talked about sacrifice, and that was our theme for the month. So all of the texts that we studied had something to do with sacrifice. As you may or may not know, we started out with Jesus, and so we closed out the month last week with Jesus. Um, and it came from Mark chapter 14, verse 36. And it was the time when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, right before he is handed over to the army to go to be crucified. And we learned that it was a very hard time for Jesus. Although we know him to be the Son of Man, the Son of God, God in the flesh, God come to earth. We still realize that he was 100% God, but also 100% human, making him vulnerable, making him emotional, making him aware of what he was about to embark upon and what he was about to experience on the cross in his very public, very brutal, very vile sacrifice and crucifixion. And so, what we essentially talked about last week, though, is that despite Jesus's disdain maybe for what he was about to embark on, and even his heartache and heartbreak that was kind of occurring in that moment of reflection and prayer, he still went on to die on the cross for our sins. And verse 36 actually pulls out the text that essentially tells, God, I know that you can take this cup from me, and if it be so, I would love for you to do so. But at the end of it, it's not about my will, Lord, it's about yours. And so the beauty of that is that we recognize that even though we might not like what we are experiencing right now, it may be really hard. We may be on the brink of breakdown or breakup or whatever, meltdown. It's just important to know that we can defer to God's will and be comfortable in doing so, because he always blesses us far more than we think when we make those sacrifices. So that is what we spoke about last week. And we talked, like I said, about sacrifice last month. This month, we're actually moving into a new topic, and we're talking about preparation. And so I think that it's important. Many of us have been in some form of quarantine, shelter at home, stay in place, whatever your state calls it. Many of us have been dealing with that since April, March, a few of us since March. And so we've all felt like at some point that our lives are on hold. And so what I believe is that we can take this time that maybe we've become comfortable with being at home and we are dealing with our emotions a little bit better, so we have the capacity to deal with it. But we're going to use this month to prepare ourselves for what is to come, not just in 2020, but things that we want in 2020, 2021. And I think it's beautiful that Tori's kicking it off, because her text beautifully aligns with what to do when you feel like what you're experiencing is a waste of your time. And so, yeah, I'll kick it off to Tori.
Oh, very well said, Michelle. I was like, look at that nice bow. Very well said. Yeah, so we're talking about preparation. And so this week we're studying from Exodus chapter 3. Verse 1 is the verse that I really want to focus on because it just has those key words in there. But of course, we always discuss a little before and afterwards, so just roll with us. But Exodus chapter 3, verse 1, I'll read it and then we'll kind of do a little backstory and then we'll catch up to this point. So Exodus 3, chapter 1, Exodus chapter 3, verse 1, I'm sorry. One day Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. Now, the key thing there for me was he led the flock far into the wilderness. So for those of us who may not be familiar with the story, I will do my best to give you my Michelle version of teaching and give you some good context. But here we have Moses. For those who don't know, his mother had to hide him for 3 months because Pharaoh wanted to kill the boys of that time, right? He wanted them to throw them into the river because he felt that they would be too powerful.
Yep.
She hid him for 3 months, and then she ended up putting him in the river. And then up the river, he was discovered by Pharaoh's daughter, who essentially adopted him and gave him the name Moses. And then from that point, Moses was raised as an Egyptian. Even though he was not, he was raised as an Egyptian. So that means he got the best education, he ate the best, he had the best experiences. And although he was an Egyptian, he still was a Hebrew. And from that, Moses was out one day and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, and he killed that Egyptian. And then the following day, Moses went back and he saw two Hebrews fighting. And he was like, hey, why are y'all fighting each other? And they're like, oh, wait a minute. Who made you the judge of us? You gonna kill us like you did the Egyptian? And so Moses is like, oh, shoot, I got to get out of here. Everybody knows what I've done. I have to run. And so he left on the run and ended up into the desert, the wilderness, for 40 years, where he met Jethro, as we just mentioned in verse 1 there. And Jethro allowed him to come in, marry his daughter, and he allowed Moses to lead his sheep. So I think that's an interesting dynamic to go from just being so well off to now you're leading sheep and they're not even your sheep.
Right.
Like you lead them, but they're not even yours. But the point in which I hope that everyone takes from this by the time we get to the end is that everything that Moses experienced was necessary to allow him to be able to lead the Israelites right out of Egypt. So even if we just go back to him when he killed the Egyptian, one of my thoughts was, Michelle, was, okay, well, if God intended for Moses to free the Israelites, why didn't he allow that to be like the starting point, the takeoff point, right? Like he could have essentially, I guess, one by one, however, caused a revolt or some sort, and that could have done it. But here's something that came to mind for me is that Moses was not yet ready for the task, right? He had spent all of his life being,
sheltered.
Thank you. That's a great word. Sheltered. So he had not yet had the experiences to lead anybody. So the other thing was that if that would have been successful, would Moses have learned how to depend on God, right? Because then it's like, I can do it on my own. I killed the Egyptians. It's all me. So God did not allow that to have to work out in his favor. I guess I say it that way. I know a few weeks ago we talked about it wasn't supposed to work, right? It's a setup for something greater. So God didn't allow that to be the uprising, the revolt that it should have been or could have been, and instead led him into the wilderness where he had to shovel sheep dung and lead sheep through the wilderness. But while he was in the wilderness, he's gaining survival techniques, right? And he's learning so much about himself because up to this point, Moses, before he goes to Pharaoh, he's 80 when
Yeah.
that happens. So it's 40 years where he's like learning himself all over again because everything that worked in the first 40 years, Michelle, it no longer serves a purpose. At least it feels like it doesn't in that moment, right? And so I see you shaking your head. So I definitely want to get you in on it, and then we'll just kind of bounce back on ideas and thoughts.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I think your take is spot on, right? So if Moses hadn't had the situation where he was embarrassed, first of all, because he did that thinking like, okay, I've done it, but nobody knows. And then to come back and I think what's interesting too is that the people who essentially are calling him out are people who he was really trying to save, right?
Yeah.
The whole purpose of him killing the Egyptian soldier was because they were brutal to his people. And so for then, he comes back and he's trying to break up this fight or whatever, and they're like, what, are you going to do that to us too? It's almost like he sees them as his people, but then they see him as an outcast.
Right.
And then for Pharaoh to find out and him to have to run away, I think I don't know. In some ways, it could be that we talked last week about isolation. Perhaps that was God calling Moses out of the world that he'd known. He was in the palace, and we just talked about it. You mentioned him being sheltered. He grew up in my opinion, very, very well off. And for Pharaoh to then be like, you betrayed me. I think Moses was kind of coming to grips with the fact that he was an outsider, even though he had been in the palace and living as, an Egyptian. He realized he had no privilege there. And so I think that it was almost like God forcing his hand and forcing him out of the element so that he could then use him and prepare him, like you said, for what was to come, because he couldn't have stayed there. You're absolutely right. He couldn't have stayed there and God have gotten the glory for it. He couldn't have.
Yeah. You mentioned something interesting. It's a side note, like maybe not even for tonight, about how he thought that he was in, right? And I think in our current climate, a lot of people can identify with that, right? Like you're thinking, I'm a part of this, and then realizing, no, you're not. But that's a whole separate thing there. But something to think about is those 40 years that Moses spent out in the wilderness. For a lot of us, and you talked about this one time. One was like a theme or something one week, Michelle, about obscurity.
Yes.
Right. Just feeling unseen, unheard. Nobody can see. I mean, even within yourself, it's like sometimes just feeling like what you're doing is not important. It doesn't matter. I'm leading sheep.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. Right. But that is so significant because him leading those sheep, him learning those survival techniques is what would help him to be able to lead people. And so what we have to learn, and what I am, I guess, always on repeatedly learning, is that it is okay. There is a blessing in obscurity. I think that's exactly how you wrote it. There's a blessing in obscurity.
Yeah.
And that is the season where God is prepping us and getting us ready. And it's really, I think, more of adjusting our mindset, finding the positive, the good in whatever the things we are experiencing. So not just looking at it as I'm just shoveling the sheep dung, I'm just doing this for the time being to get by, but there is something that God wants me to get from this particular season.
Yeah.
And trusting God and knowing that that his plan, whatever it is still going to be on track. No matter wherever I'm at feels like it's worthless, it's pointless. I'm just ready to fast forward, get through this.
Yeah.
That there is a purpose for this moment. And I think we always talk about this. It's really just about trusting God, right? And not what we see, not what's going on around us, but knowing that even though I am just leading sheep at this moment, I'm still going to be able to lead people.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we struggle. We lose the battle, because our faith drops off.
Yeah.
because 40 years, that's a long time. Okay. I be struggling 6 months to a year sometimes. I'm like, yeah, okay. But 40 years, that is a long time to be working, I guess, in the realm of obscurity.
Yeah.
Um, and I just want to know, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh man, I have so many. I have so many thoughts about this because I've personally lived it. I've read books on people who personally lived it. Sometimes I feel like I'm still living it, and it's not. I think sometimes when we talk about obscurity, people think that you automatically mean like, I want to be famous, right? That's not
Yeah.
necessarily the
No.
case, right? Sometimes your obscurity is that you haven't been able to transition maybe into a new season or a new part of your life. So it might be a work, it might be you want a husband and God hasn't provided him yet. It might be you want to have kids and God hasn't allowed you to do that yet. It's obscurity. You can be in obscurity in lots of different seasons and in lots of different ways. I think one of the things you mentioned was sometimes we get on ourselves, and I think that there are also times where we allow ourselves to succumb to society and to what other people are saying. So we might be in a job right now that might be paying us $10 or $15 an hour, and we see other people out here making more than that, and so we automatically feel pressure to then go out and try to find something else or find something more or do something different. And as you were talking, it reminded me of the MLK quote, and I'm going to butcher it, so I'm not gonna try to say it word for word, but it's something about, I think it's about being a street sweeper, and it's about being the best street sweeper you can be. And I think that it's important for us, particularly as believers, but wherever we are in our season of life, whatever it is, no matter what we do, who we are, where we are, whatever, I think it's important for us to be doing the best that we can, right? The Bible tells us that we should be working as unto the Lord. And so when you take on that mantra, or you apply that to your life, that means that no matter what season of my life I'm in, I'm doing the best I can to be the best I can. And so as we turn it back to Moses and we think about him shepherding, you know, I'm not 100% about the hierarchy of jobs, but I would say that shepherd was probably on the lower end, depending on and particularly in this instance, because like you pointed out, these aren't his sheep. So he's tending to somebody else's sheep. At least when we know, small King David was, at least, it was his dad's sheep. This man is not even related to Jethro, right?
Yeah.
He just happened to be in a place where he could save his daughters, and Jethro did him a favor and allowed him to be shepherd of these sheep. So Moses is really at the bottom of the totem pole, knowing that he's come from the palace. So I think that, as we continue to talk about him and what he was prepared to do, I think this obscurity in my mind was really to get Moses to see who he had been or what he was supposed to be all along, outside of his palace living, right?
Yeah.
Because Pharaoh was very clear that, you might have been here, but you don't have any of the privilege of being in the palace. So that's just my take.
No, when you were talking, something came to mind, and it goes to verse 5 in the same chapter, where it says, "Do not come any closer," the Lord warned. "Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground." And this idea comes from one of the sermons from Bishop Jakes, where he says, God is in every season of our life, right? So this is the same exact ground that he had been walking on before.
Yeah.
And here God is telling him, take off your sandals. This is holy ground. And I think a lot of times we look at where we are and we fail to see God is right where we are. And we have to be careful to not curse where we are.
Yes.
And so God has not designated us to be in that place, right? And so for me, that stands out because, it feels like this is nothing. Like you said, working as though we're working unto the Lord, right? Doing it for the Lord. everything that we're doing, it is for a purpose. It is for a reason. And when you trust and you know that wherever God has you for that point and season of time, because Moses' life, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, is in seasons, 40 years hanging out, it's all good, 40 years in the wilderness, and then he becomes a leader. But God is literally with him in every step, right?
Yeah.
When his mother is hiding him, God is with him. When he's in the river, God is with him. When Pharaoh's daughter gets, God is with him. Even when he makes his home, and this is something, Michelle, I want us to go back to this. A lot of times, I think we beat ourselves up when we do things on our own, right? So when Moses killed the Egyptian, that was his own doing. But even looking at how God takes those things that we do on our own,
and
our own mistakes, our own flaws, what we screw up at, and he still uses it and gets the glory out of it, right? So knowing that no matter where we are, even if you're in a place that you got yourself in, that God can still be in that place. He can still be in he can still be exactly where you are, even if you feel like this is a place of nothingness. This is pointless, or I'm here because I messed up.
Yeah.
And what I think God want us to get from this is that no matter where we are, He is with us. This is holy ground. Where you are is holy ground. But it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's all about our mind. You know, it's the battle in our mind of how we perceive things, how we see things. Where you are is holy ground.
Yes. I wanted to point out, as you were talking about where you are is holy ground, to me that is grace. It's the epitome of grace, that there is enough grace for us no matter where we are, no matter what season of our lives we're in. And I don't know why this popped into my head, but I think often about, because faith first is not just for Bible thumpers and people, who are familiar with church. It's for everybody. And I think that, there are certain aspects of church culture that has excommunicated and ostracized people for mistakes that God is going to use to birth something new in them, to elevate them. And I think often about, single moms, right? Say you're a single mom, had a child of wedlock. We've beat up a lot of single mothers, and it's so powerful to me when that single mother comes out of everything that she's been through to birth a child that goes on to then save the world in many cases. And so I think, as we talk about ourselves and our minds, we also have to trust and know that God's grace is sufficient, meaning that everybody else might be talking about us. They might have seen our mistake. They might know that it's public, right? As long as we realize, though, that God's grace is sufficient, God can use that to then birth something in us and move us forward. And so we have to allow God's voice to be louder than the people around us, because sometimes the people around us will draw a wedge between us and God. And they will remind us of our mistake when God has said, I've cast that away. I don't even know what you're talking about. I forgot that a long time ago. That sin you committed was nailed to the cross. So why are you still worried about it? You know what I mean? So we really have to also remind ourselves and those around us, like, there's nothing that you can keep me from. If God says it's mine, it's mine. I don't care who. Literally, I don't care who says I can't have it. If God says I can, that settles it. So just know it doesn't matter where you come from, who your parents are, what your mama did, what you did even. It doesn't matter. If God has something for you, His grace is sufficient, and the place you are right now is still holy ground. It might not look like it. It might look real dry. It might look depleted. It might look like there is no hope for you. But I'm telling you, like Tori said, that this is holy ground. If you can just hold on to that, I believe that that's when God does the inner work, right? Sometimes there's this quote that's like, sometimes God changes our circumstances. Sometimes God changes the way we see them. And I really believe that the majority of our walk as believers is about how we see our own circumstances versus the actual circumstance. So if I see this as a season of desolation, I see this as a season of desertment, right? Like, I feel like God has deserted me. Then that's going to be everywhere I look. It doesn't matter how much God is blessing me. If all I see is him deserting me and all I see is I don't have enough, God, this isn't enough, God, then that means I'm going to be in a state of anxiety and desolation. But if I see, and if I can hold on to the fact that God provides, that his word tells me every need he has, every need I have, he will supply, then I should be able to see God in every season. And that's something that I'm speaking right now, but it's something that I myself, it's a daily practice because it gets hard, right? When you go a few days and you feel like, okay, well, that God doesn't seem like it is going to add up. You know, I need you to move. I have to remind myself, this is holy ground. This is holy ground.
Listen, Reverend Prophet Hankerson.
Stop.
That's enough for us to just be like, all right, let's close our books and let's go home. Like, yeah, that blessed me, Michelle. While you were talking, just a thought that, you know, we don't serve a God that is wasteful.
Oof.
You know, and every broken piece, every part of our life that we feel is flawed, God, he is a master at taking things that are broken, right? He is and making it useful, making it good, making it work out in your behalf, and your all things work together, right? All things work, all things. Those broken pieces, those bit pieces, that all of that, it works for your good. And I really felt like I was sitting in a therapy session for a second when you were talking, you know, just because it again, it is all about the way we see what we're experiencing. And we do have a choice to see the good in it. Because Moses, right? I'm isolated, I'm by myself. I'm not, because that was his family. I don't have them anymore. But God provided for him every step of the way. God set him up in such a way, right, that it would prepare him for what he was getting ready to do.
Yeah.
And so once we shift our focus from, God, why is this happening to me, to, God, what can I learn from this? Right? Because if Moses would not have gone through the wilderness and lived there and learned, you know, the ins and outs of it, how could he then have the credibility to tell people, I'm going to lead you through this,
Right,
with something you have no experience with? And so oftentimes the things that we go through, the places that we are in our lives, the letdowns and all those things, they're not even really for you. We talk about this all the time. This walk, you know, because a lot of times we see stuff, we're selfish. It's all about me. It's not even about you, right? It's about all the people that are connected to you, the people you don't even see.
Yeah.
So if Moses needed to be able to experience that, to have the credibility to say, hey, we can do this, we can make it. I know where to go. I know what not to do, what not to eat in the wilderness. I know how to navigate through that. And so just like us, when we have experiences, when we have those times in our lives when we feel isolated, when we feel like this is not holy ground, God often has us there so we can go back and lead somebody else through that same situation, right? Because how can you tell me, right, that God can sustain you when you've never been in a place where you needed to be sustained?
Yeah.
You know, and so we often want the message, but we don't want the mess. We want the testimony, but we don't want the test. And you got to have it. Going back to what you said about how we sometimes ostracize, you know, single mothers and things like that. God, again, will take that mess that you deem as mess and turn it into a beautiful message. We've seen it so many times again. So know that even if you're in a position where it's your fault, it's your mess, God can take that and make it into a beautiful message. He can take that test, that struggle, and make it into an awesome testimony. So you will have the credibility, right, to be able to then say, hey, let me show you what God can do. Prior to Dustin being dying or being killed, right, in a car accident, I could have never told anybody, you know, what it's like to grieve and to mourn and how to get through that process and what it looks like, even though it's different for everybody. But just even having your own, well, I've had this experience, right? I could never speak to that. I can speak to God being a keeper and how when you feel like everything's falling apart, but he holds you together. I would have no credibility in that. And that's not to say that you can't speak on stuff that you have not experienced. That's not what I'm saying. but it definitely helps
Oh yeah.
when you can say, I've been through that door. I know what that looks like. I felt that before, or I felt something similar to that, right? And so a lot of times, the things that we're experiencing is to build up our credibilities, for lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah.
So when I tell somebody that God is a keeper,
Mm-hmm.
let me tell you how I know.
Yes. Yeah. I think that not only helps your credibility, but I think that it helps your confidence too, because the one thing we talked about Moses, we actually talked about it a few weeks ago, is he came to God with all these excuses, and God was like, "Listen, I've been preparing you for this since your mama sent you down the river in that basket. So there
Yeah,
is no way you're getting out of this, right?" But I think to your point is it also helps with our confidence in the way that we relay our messages, because you having experienced what you've experienced, you know when someone is dealing with something, even if they don't tell you, right? So
right.
you're able to even to go to them in a way that they might not even be thinking about it or knowing. And for you to be able to speak confidently about what God has done in your life, it goes in it helps you and it's helping them, right? Because it's
Yeah,
reinforcing like, God, yes, you brought me through this. When I was on my bed and I couldn't move or whatever, God, you showed me this. Even the things that I've experienced, I now talking about it, you realize it's credibility and it's also confidence, because you can speak proudly and boldly about what God has done on your behalf. And whether they believe you or not, you can press on because
yeah,
you've been through it, you've done it, you know for sure what He has brought you through. And as you were talking, I was thinking about this season in Moses' life was preparation, but going back to his mom putting him in that basket, that was even preparation, because she put him there so that he would escape the judgment, right?
right.
But then she didn't realize that he would be taken into the palace, and then she would kind of sort of get her son back for a time
Yeah,
because she was
yeah,
nursing him. So it's like God was really putting all these pieces. He had pieced all this together before Moses was even old enough to understand what his ministry would be. So it's like our life really is recurring seasons of preparation. So like, we may be in a season of preparation right now for something that we might not really see come to fruition until next year or the year after or the year after that. So it's why we could come to God in obedience, but also going back to the scripture is understanding and knowing that this is holy ground. Even this place, like I said, where I can't see nothing. Like I don't know how you plan to use this season of my life, but I'm trusting you will. But I don't see nothing. So I'm just, I'm gonna do what I need to do in hopes that this is really truly not going to be wasted, because it's looking a little grim. I don't know. I'm lonely. I feel isolated. God, what are you doing here? Because those are the things that we ask ourselves. It's like myself, I'm feeling like, am I doing enough, God? Am I serving you enough? Am I serving enough? Am I searching enough? Am I doing the right things? Should I pay for that? Should I do this? And the whole time, God is like, calm down. Take off the sandals. Take off your sandals.
yeah,
This is holy ground. And I think there's even beauty in taking off your sandals. The acknowledgement that this is holy ground is not only a holy place and a sacred place, but it's a place where you can be comfortable, where you can rest. And I think, and not just rest like take a nap, but it's a place where I can lay my burdens. I can
mm,
lay my worries and my fears, because it talks in this scripture about how Moses was like, whoa, what's happening here almost. Like, and I'm sure, because I haven't come to a bush yet that hasn't burned up, right? So I'm just I can imagine what that felt like. But thinking about this exchange between him and God wanted to make him comfortable so he could really see and hear him. And so So yeah, I don't know. There's so much I feel like in this little text
Yeah.
here about our friend Moses.
Here's a question that I can pose to everybody, right? Can you do what God has called you to do in this season so you can be where you dreamed of yourself being, right? Or where He is calling you to be long term? Because a lot of times we miss God in the small windows of opportunity and doing the small things because we're looking for those big stages. And oftentimes God is trying to prep us, in the practice room. We're practicing, but we miss it because we see it as being insignificant.
Yes.
Every day you get up, I don't care where you go to work at, I don't care what you do, who you married to, who your children are, see it as significant.
Yeah.
Because where you are today, you won't be there 20 years from now, 10 years from now, 5 years you won't be there. And so we again have to reshape the way we see our lives. Like you said, Michelle, reshape the way, knowing that everything that we're experiencing, that nothing is going to go to waste.
Yeah.
Even going back to, it was important for Moses to have been in that household with the Egyptians, right? Because he spoke the language, he understood the protocol, he knew where to go in, out, and where to come out at. He would have never known that
Yeah.
had he not lived with them.
Yeah.
Every piece, small, it seems insignificant, right? And for a lot of us, a lot of people, if you go back to their childhood, right, feeling unwanted, unloved. My mother gave me away. My father was not present. My family disowns me. All those things is stepping. God is ordering your steps. Even in those times where you feel like you are by yourself, He is ordering your steps. You just have to trust Him and not give up. And that's the thing too. Moses didn't give up.
No.
And I don't know if he would still had that same tenacity had he not been in the wilderness for those 40 years to go before Pharaoh. I think it was like 15 times, right?
Yes.
I don't know if he would have had that same tenacity, even to the fact where Pharaoh called out his magicians.
Uh-huh.
He was like, boom, here go a snake. And Moses was like, oh, I can do that.
Right.
So he threw out his rod, and here's a snake, right? He stuck his hand in his chest, came out, leprosy, put it back in. So God was prepping him in the wilderness.
Yeah.
And so when you get to that place, it's that aha moment when you go, oh, this is why I had to go through that.
Yes.
But we're here for you in that moment where you feel like, I have no idea why God has me here. Because everything that I knew that worked in Egypt does not work here in the wilderness. Everything that I went to school and I studied for, I am not able to use it and apply it right now, right? So for those seasons in your life where it feels useless or you're just unsure, you don't know, we're here to tell you that God is ordering your steps.
Yes.
Don't lose hope. Don't lose faith. Know that every day is significant and that we do not serve a God that is wasteful. He would not allow any of your pain, any of your hurt to go to waste.
Yeah.
He's not going to do that to you.
Yeah. I think it's important. That's something so important, Tori, is just to, and I need to find another word for this, but I call it don't clock. I say like don't clock God, but it's really more so about don't expect God to do it the same way every time.
Oh,
like
yeah.
you said, he's a predictable God, but he's unpredictable. Meaning we can always know that he's going to work on our behalf, but we don't necessarily know how and in which ways he will work on our behalf. So our only assignment is to wait in expectation. It's not to wait in expectation and feel like we can be psychic and know which way he's going to move. And so that's something that I have to actively work, because I'm like, oh, well, that kind of looks like the last time, guy. Are you gonna do? It's like, oh, are you gonna do
familiar?
And God's like, girl, I'm like 5 miles ahead. Bye. So I think that it's important as we talk about believing and preparing and understanding the ways in which God moves. It's important to just say, be open to God breaking the system for you. Be open to God doing it a different way. And I will tell you, as someone who's been here before, that if you put your hopes and your dreams into God doing it one way, and he doesn't do it that way, you are setting yourself up for major disappointment. What's better is to say, God, I know and I declare that you're going to do it. I don't know how you're going to do it, but I know that you're going to do it. Give me the peace to sit back and watch you work versus the anxiousness and the anxiety to try to check wherever you're going or wherever you're going to be. I don't need to clock you, God, because I know that you are all knowing, all powerful. You are a sovereign God. So you have my best interest at heart. I don't necessarily have to know every move to know that you're going to deliver me from this, right? When somebody's getting a house built, well, in this day and age, sometimes people are this nosy, but I would argue that anybody who's ever had a home built, right? You may go over the blueprint with the builder and you know the plans, but you're not going back to your home site every day to check and see which nail they put in the wall or which banister they hung or which lighting fixture they installed. You're not doing that.
Yeah.
You're letting them build the home the way they see fit, the way you've agreed on. So let's try to exercise that same patience and that same style when we're dealing with God, because God is way more dependable than any single contractor, builder, realtor I know. Trust me. So just know that God is building it the way that he sees fit, in a way that is going to stand, a way that's going to stand.
I love analogies, and that was like spot on, perfect. We have to trust the builder.
Yeah.
We have to. I know you mentioned, I think you said you and your friend were talking about co-creating, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we want to be the sole creator, like I got this,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I got it, and then we don't leave space or opportunity to allow God to say, but this way is better.
Yeah.
And so we have to leave that door open. You can still have your dreams, you can still have your goals, but leave that space, that opportunity for God to say, we're going to do it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Or it could be a whole lot differently, but no, whatever it is, that it is ultimately better than what you could have ever asked for.
Yeah.
While you were talking, this came back to mind where when the bush was burning, and I want to make sure I'm reading it correctly. Verse 4, it says, when the Lord saw Moses come to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am, right? So while you were talking about the plans and things like that, is our only real job, Michelle, is to be available.
Girl.
And so we miss God because he's calling us, but we're distracted by the other things that are going on in our lives. And sometimes rightfully, not to underestimate or undermine saying those things are not important or they're not urgent or whatever you want to call them. But when he is calling us, we have to say, here I am. Part of our steps being ordered is being available. And so imagine Moses being like, I'm out, and when he was calling him walking away, right? And so for a lot of us, God is calling us to a lot of different things. He's placed things on our hearts. He's placed things continuously in our past where we know, like, I'm probably supposed to be doing this. And the only thing he's waiting for us to say is, here I am.
Yeah.
Here I am. And when you can get to that place to say, here I am, going back to what you were saying, Michelle, I trust you. You are the master builder. If anybody's gonna do it right, it's gonna be you.
Yeah.
I don't have to know where, like you said, where every nail go. I don't have to know how everything is gonna be done or accomplished, but I trust you. Here I am.
Yeah.
So when he's calling you, and he's calling a lot of us, you have to make yourself available.
You do. And you I think availability goes back to what's our favorite word, obedience.
Yeah.
If I'm available, that means that I'm standing in obedience, right? And I think that I would say that much of the time when we are stressed out and we feel like our plate is too full is because we are focused on something that God has not told us to be focused on. And I say that from someone who is habitually wrong in this area. My plate is always full, and I'm always like, God, I don't know how I got all this stuff on my plate, God, but I need you to help me hold it up. And God's like, I never told you to put that on your plate. I told you to do this thing over here, and you're doing that thing over there. So a part of availability is just staying plugged in, staying close to God, staying in communion with God, so that you can hear when he says, nope, you need to say no to that thing over there so you can say yes to this thing over here. Because I think what also happens, Tori, to us, we can't say, here I am. Guess why? Because we have 25,000 other things that we are so focused on. And we're literally like, well, God, what you want me to deliver the people, but I got to see after all of this over here. And so it's about making yourself available and being intentional about making yourself available. I there was another thought I had, but it's gone now. So
but just to keep in the realm of God preparing us, no matter where we are, he's always prepping us for something else. And I know we mentioned this last week, and we mentioned it quite often, is to be careful to not build a house where we're supposed to pitch a tent. And going back again to knowing that wherever we are, it is holy ground. Don't get stuck where you are comfortable. I mean, because even with this, even though Moses was comfortable being with the Egyptians, he became comfortable with Jethro and his family. You know, he was chilling, but I've got this down packed now. God is always forever moving, God. He's a God that's always moving. And so we have to be careful to get stuck in the past. We have to be very, very careful to get stuck in the past. It is, I said this last week, I believe, is a dangerous thing to get stuck and to not move.
Yeah.
Because like you said, in obedience, when we are disobedient, we don't only hold ourselves up. If Moses would not have been moving in the way in which God was calling him, he didn't say, you know, well, here I am, or even got beyond his excuses to do what he was called to do. There was an entire generations upon generations locked up, right, in bondage. And Moses, and for us, you know, it could be generations in your family, it could be 4 or 5 people, whatever it is. Trust me, it is significant in God's eyesight.
It is.
And so in our obedience, we don't just set ourselves free, we unconsciously set others free as well. Yeah. And sometimes not even that you're doing anything directly from them. Sometimes, Michelle, people will see the way in which you are living and trusting God, and it frees them to live and trust God that same way. It's not always that you are giving them a message directly. Sometimes it's just in the way in which you live your life.
Yes.
You free other people.
Yeah. Somebody's always watching. Someone is always watching. People who you will never know their names. You may never cross paths, may never say a word to each other. They are watching you, and they know you, and they know what you do, which is why I'm always telling people to be careful about your platform, because somebody is watching you. And it's your example, whether it's, 5 degrees of separation or it's 1 degree of separation. They are watching you, and they are making decisions about their faith based on the way you execute yours. And so it's just like you said, it's important that we be mindful of that. The thing that I had forgotten, it came back to me, and I was thinking about, as you were talking about how, Moses was like, here I am, God. And then God proceeded to give him, the revelation or the information he needed. What I also think is beautiful about this story with Moses is that after Moses was kind of like, okay, Lord, I'll go. I love how God kind of cleared the path for him, right? Because a lot of his hesitation was that he wasn't qualified, or he didn't know enough, or he couldn't speak well enough. So then God gave him Aaron. And then, even when it was time for him to go back to Pharaoh, the Pharaoh that he had grown up with had passed away. So everybody, God had essentially rid the palace of anyone who had ill will towards Moses. So it was almost like he had a clean slate. And I would say to anyone who's feeling a little bit of hesitation, maybe you're at a situation where you're facing and you know God is calling you to do something, I would just encourage you to know that if God, it's gonna sound cliche, but I'm gonna say it anyway. If God calls you to it, he'll bring you through it. And that's like in every way, not just what you feel may be your disqualifications or your personal setbacks, but more so that he'll bring you through it and that he will clear a path for you. There's so many texts and scriptures in the Bible that talks about God clearing a path and making a way. And when we talk about that and we sing those songs, I don't think we realize that God can literally make a path for you to do what you have been called to do. But that's if you go. And that goes back to being available, and it goes back to being obedient. God is not going to clear a path for you until you be willing to go. So if you think like, if you're looking at the path and you like, well, God, it's a mountain over there and all those, God is like, well, why should I cast down the mountain? Why should I clear a path for you if you aren't willing to go? Why don't you trust me that I'll clear that path as you go? And that's another thing. It's like, don't expect for the picture to be perfect while you're still sitting on the sideline. You haven't even started the race yet, and you worried about what's at the end of it. No, honey. That's not how it works. Like Moses kept hitting these roadblocks, so to speak, right?
Right.
Moses would go and say, well, God said this, and Pharaoh would say, well, okay, fine. But then guess what he'd do? His heart would harden again. So it was like Moses and Aaron could have easily been discouraged, but what they knew, in which God had proven time and time again, was that God was on their side. So even in the moment, it might feel like, well, this isn't going to work out. I don't know how that's going to work out. Just know it will. Just let your brain default to it's going to work, because it will. It will. You don't have to see it. You just have to know it will, and then go. I know it's irrational and it sounds crazy, but that's what faith is. That is what faith is. We have to just go and know that God is going with us.
You said so much, Michelle. That's why I had to write it down. And so it made me think about it, and I think you basically said it this way: is that while we are being prepared, while we're prepping, God is working on the other half. He's clearing the way, right? But like you said, sometimes we're watching and we want him to clear the way before we get started. And that is not how he works. But then even going to what you said about him, Moses continuously going before Pharaoh. Even that was necessary, right? So he could trust God. So when he got to that Red Sea, that he knew that if God could help me get through this roadblock after this roadblock after this roadblock, this Red Sea is nothing.
Yes.
It is nothing. And so if we get to a place in our lives, and because we do, and I think we don't really, I guess, pay as much attention to it as we should, God over and over again removes roadblocks, clears the way, time and time again. So when we get to our Red Sea moment, why is your faith failing you?
Yeah.
The same God that kept you hid for 3 months, the same God that got you up the river to Pharaoh's daughter, the same God that allowed you to live in a lap of luxury, the same God that allowed you to get into the wilderness and yet survive, the same God that sent you back over and over again to Pharaoh. It's the same God that will part the Red Seas in our lives.
Yeah.
And so if he's done it before, he will do it again. Said this last week. God has never failed you.
No.
You still hear you alive. He has never failed you. And he is not going to start now. Yeah. So for anybody who's feeling like you're in a season in your life where it feels pointless, you have no idea, why am I even here, maybe? Your life has purpose. It has meaning. God is ordering your steps even when it does not look like it.
Yeah.
He is not a God of waste. He will use everything, every disappointment, even the good, because it's not always bad. He will use everything, and he is going to work it for your good. There will come to a time and a season in your life where you will have that, Oprah calls it that aha moment, when you go, this is why God had me to go through this.
Yes.
You just have to make it there. And so sometimes, we run a little low, we run on Michelle. So we have to stop and fill up. We have to keep fueling ourselves up on God's words, on his promises. And I always say this, surrounding yourself with people who are going to help you stay fueled up.
Mm-hmm.
Because this can be a long journey.
Yeah.
For Moses, it's 40 years. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
And then God changes his life suddenly. And like that, he did for Moses, he can do for us. He can change our lives suddenly. We have to trust him. He's ordering our steps. He's preparing us for something greater. But we cannot die in the wilderness. We can't give up in the wilderness. And we can't get comfortable in the wilderness.
Yeah. Like you was talking about earlier about we could go home. I think we could go home now because I recall what you said and I wrote that down. See it as significant. See it as significant. See every minute, every moment as significant. You may be crying right now, but 5 minutes from now, you may be you may have a new perspective. You might go to bed tonight really upset, and you may wake up in the morning thinking about how great and how awesome God is that he woke you up for another day and you have another shot at it, right? So it's important that I call it like flip the switch. When our flesh tries to flip the switch on and we start to think about all of the human things, that all the human limitations we have, all of the human things that we can't be or we aren't equipped to do or we are disqualified for, flip the switch back so that your faith is activated and that the God in you starts to speak and the spirit comes alive and you start to realize what lives inside of you, which is essentially the essence of God, and how powerful you are when you connect with the spirit and you trust and believe that God is ordering your steps and that every moment is significant. That can really change your life. And I'm thinking about it now as my own. Sometimes I have days where I feel like, well, God, what is it? Like, what am I not doing? Am I not doing enough? Am I inadequate? Should I just give it all up? And then that faith switch hits. And then I realize, God, you have me here for a reason. So if I can't do anything else, I'll rest in the fact that this is significant, that you have me here for a purpose. And I might not see it today. And you have to be okay with that. But you have to trust and know that eventually the way will be made. And this seemingly insignificant time in my life is really what pivots me or positions me for power so that I can do what God has called me to do. That is what this life is about. Tori and I talk about it all the time. Every day won't be roses. Every day you won't be singing praises. Some days you're going to be speaking lamentations and you're going to lament because it's hard and you feel like giving up and you're at the end of your rope and you feel like your heart is being broken and it's in a million pieces. And God, I don't see how any good can come from this. But the same thing was said about our Father, Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. Nothing good can come from this. But how much good has come from him? How much good can come from your life and your testimony and your worship, even in the seasons where it feels like nothing's working? See it as significant. Tori, you need to get that as a quote. I just feel like that's your thing now. See it as significant.
Yeah, because I've been there where I've seen my life as not being significant.
Yeah.
Right. So when you were talking about crying and you wake up in the morning and sometimes it's crying, I'm like, I don't even want to wake up in the morning. Like, I'm cool. Just let me just stop. Right. Yes. And then you go on that next day or days later and your life is totally different.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was necessary for me to start seeing my life as significant and those moments of those wilderness moments as being significant, that God is going to use those things. And something greater is ahead. It's keeping that hope and that faith, knowing that this is not the end. But where I am at the moment, this is holy ground. God is here. He is with me.
Yes.
Wherever I am at, he is with me. And you have to know that wherever you are in your life, whether you see it as being the most important time of your life or I could be doing something better, it is significant.
Yes.
And it matters how you deal with this time in your life. It's important. Like you said, Michelle, it's pivotal.
Yeah.
You can die here, or you can use this as a launching pad to something greater.
Yes.
So God is preparing us. No matter where you are, God is preparing us. He's always preparing us. And while he's preparing us, he is clearing the way. It is important for us to not get into a rush, right? Because we jump out too soon and the way ain't made. Well, it ain't made because it was too soon, right? Or then sometimes even understanding, knowing that we talk about this all the time, while we're walking, it still looks like failure. Going to Pharaoh by the 5th time looks a lot like maybe this ain't what I'm supposed to be doing. Trust God. Year 1, year 5, year 10, year 15, Moses, year 40. Trust him. Where you are is holy ground. Rest in that. I'm gonna sleep real good tonight. Resting in the fact of knowing that where I am is where I'm supposed to be. It's significant. This is holy ground. God is preparing you for something so much greater.
Yeah.
But those are my thoughts, Michelle.
I mean, those are good thoughts. Those are favored thoughts. Those are thoughts that we needed. I personally needed to hear. And I'm just, nothing wasted. There's nothing wasted.
Nothing.
That's so good. So good. Girl, I don't have nothing else. You can close us out. Look.
Thank y'all as always for spending time with us. We love you guys. We're always thinking about you. Please, this Friday, 12 noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard, join us for our weekly Faith First Fridays prayer calls. The number is always posted in Faith First Friday. Michelle and I posted. If you need it, DM us, whatever it is. We're here for you. We love you. And as always, just thank you for spending this time with us. It means so much to us. And know that your life is significant and that there's nothing in your life that God will allow to go to waste. He is not a wasteful God. He will use every piece of your life and turn what you see as a wreck into a masterpiece, because that's the kind of God that we serve.
Yes.
All right. Well, y'all have a good night.
Good night.
Talk to you later, Michelle.
Okay. Bye.